Okay, now back to randoms. We got 28 randos left, so let's see what we roll next. It's gonna be 10. What is 10? A nobody's way up to an exploration hero. I'm gonna be honest, that's just a bunch of word salad to me. Let's see what it is.
You know, I gotta be honest. I love a show where literally the first shot of the main character makes you go, oh my god, this show looks like fucking dog shit. I got about 5 minutes into, what is this, a nobody's something something exploration. Who gives a shit what the title is? This show looks fucking awful. It's, you know, I come across a lot of like mid and mediocre looking anime and just a lot of like bad looking anime. This one's towards the bottom. Character design's terrible. The way stuff moves looks so fucking janky and bad. Color design is flat as a fucking board. It is so terrible looking. And just even in terms of like visual intrigue, it just doesn't get it. Like, so you know when anime is trying to do like contrast of like energy level, like there's a scene where like a character's like looking at like a drop from a monster he got, and he's like super excited. There's like light beams coming out of him, and then it does the thing where it's like quick cut to like, wait, hold on a minute. Very standard anime, like, transition, I guess. But the way this show does it, there's like barely any contrast between the first shot and the second shot. And so it just doesn't look good. It's, man, what happened here? Also, this, like, so it's a dungeon crawler show, but it looks like there's still modern technology. The guy's got a smartphone. There are like lights strung up in this cave. Right now, I'm looking at a shot of a metal sign bolted to the walls of the cave. And it all looks very modern, except for the fact that they're in a dungeon. And the guy's got like stat screen HUDs in front of his eyes. What are we doing here? Who? This has to be like a loss for the studio, right? This has to have lost money. They had to have known that it was going to lose money. Or is this just anime industry math where it doesn't fucking matter because they make $80 gajillion off other stuff? Why?
Okay, exploration hero. Off the list. That was garbage. Let's roll again. Bump down the random number generator to see what we get. 24. What is 24? Kinnikuman. Perfect Origin Arc. I have not watched any of Kinnikuman, actually. I'm not going to fault this show if I just don't understand what's going on. But I'm just going to jump in here and see what happens.
Well, that worked out slightly better than the last time I tried to jump into the 87th season of a classic anime that's finally getting an ending. But unfortunately still did not super vibe with it. I watched the first episode of Kinnikuman Perfect Origin Arc. It's fine. Very, very classic shonen. I believe the manga comes from the 80s and 90s. And the last season of the anime, I believe, was sometime in the 90s. Or maybe the early 2000s. I'm not sure. I am not all that familiar with Kinnikuman. Weirdly enough, this first episode does a good job of... I skipped over episode 0 because I was just like, I don't feel like watching that. But the first episode proper does an okay job of filling you in on what the situation is for this world. And where the different alliances are, what exactly is happening. So props for that. I was not confused at all. That doesn't necessarily mean I was vibing with it though. This is a very plain adaptation. That kind of... The aesthetic reminds me of the aesthetic for the Captain Tsubasa reboot, but without the extreme color shifts and hyper compressed sound design that comes with a David production project. I think Production IG is actually doing this reboot, and if so, this is the blandest Production IG anime I've seen in a while. It's not bad. There's nothing wonky about it. It doesn't really break at all, but it also barely moves. The action scenes are just pretty bland and not at all thrilling. So we're not getting... Because I think, if I recall correctly, the original was done by Toei Animation? So wait, was this done by Production IG? I saw Production IG in the credits, but it's very rare for Toei to let go of a property. So, I don't know. Anyway, the action's not very good in this, from the first episode that I saw. And there was a lot of action in the first episode. So, it's not like they're skimping out on fight scenes. It's just that the fight scenes aren't particularly good. It did kind of make me want to go back and watch Kinnikuman, though. Maybe I'll just decide to, I don't know, add this to the backlog or something, because the characters seem at least a little bit fun. Although the main character didn't even show up in this first episode. So I don't know how well that will go. But I like the designs. They're very simple 80s, 90s shonen designs. But they get the job done. So, I guess my takeaway from this is, if I was a huge Kinnikuman fan, I would either really like this arc, or I would be kind of disappointed at how bland it looked. Honestly, I don't know why they didn't just reboot it. But I guess we're here now. Oh well.
Okay, Kinnikuman coming off the list for now. Maybe if I go back and rewatch the original series, I might jump back to it, but we're skipping it for now. Back to the random number generator to see what we roll next. It's going to be 19. Bye Bye Earth. I saw Crunchyroll promoting this show constantly, and I have absolutely no clue what it's about. I don't think I know anyone who watched it. Let's give it a go.
To Ubukata, you magnificent crazy man. Please, never change. I just watched all of Bye Bye Earth somehow. I can tell you this somehow is, A, it was only 10 episodes, so slightly shorter than the usual one core series, but B, man, this is a really interesting world. Cool? Not really. Thematically coherent? Questionable. Interesting? Definitely. It's like, you can always... Okay, if you don't know who Toho Ubukata is, he's a old school anime writer. Been around since probably the early 2000s, I think. The thing he's probably most known for is Marduk Scramble, if you've ever seen those movies. I haven't seen those yet. But he also was the series composition writer for Ruby Ice Queendom, if any of you saw that. Which I did a whole analysis video about. I think I also read a couple of... I think he wrote Pilgrim Jaeger, I think. I read a couple volumes of that. I didn't think that one was particularly good, but it was interesting. So, this guy is like from the old guard of crazy anime writers. And apparently he wrote the light novel for this in like 2007 and 2008. I don't know if he was the... I didn't check to see if... I don't think he was the series composition for the anime, but he did write the light novels. So... Actually, I don't know if they're light novels or regular novels. Who knows? But anyway, this is a... The thing that immediately struck me about this show is it is not doing any hand-holding when it comes to explaining this world to you. Either you pick it up as you go, or you don't. And honestly, that's pretty fucking cool. I complain so often, and I'm not the only one in this. This is a pretty common complaint with a lot of anime, especially like modern anime, is that they over-explain the worlds to the point of them just not being interesting anymore. And just, especially with shows that don't need their world explained and can be pretty self-evident. This show very rarely explains itself to you in like an exposition type scene. And like the few moments that it does, it's like sometimes the main character's sword talks to her just to do like a single sentence or two of exposition. And even those moments, as like, it didn't really need it. Now, this kind of storytelling comes with pros and cons. The pro is it makes the world feel that much more interesting, and it gets you really excited to sort of dive into it and be like, okay, well, what does this mean? Okay, why does that... the army of insatiable nothing... emptiness or whatever? What the fuck is that? What does that mean? What is it gonna do? How does it work? Which is half explained by the end of this first season. So there's just a lot of really cool things. And also just the world is really cool. Sometimes kind of corny. Like, I feel like the music motifs go a little too far and beat you over the head a little too much. But can't say it's not interesting. It's got sort of a... It reminds me a little bit of like the Lord of the Rings lore, like Silmarillion lore, where it's like the world was sung into existence. It kind of reminds me of that. And so it's also... So like you get little bits and pieces of like, oh, Ubukata, I see you read Lord of the Rings. And then it's like, oh, I see you read Fate Stay Night. And it's just really fun seeing all these bits and pieces of world building come together to form a pretty, if not necessarily a thematically cohesive world, but at least like narratively cohesive. Like everything feels like it belongs here. And just the different ways, like I like this idea of like a sword growing with its user. I think that was really fucking cool idea. And just breaking someone's sword essentially means breaking off their potential or some equivalent of that. I'm not entirely sure now that I think about it. Which brings us to the downside of this kind of storytelling is if it doesn't explain it and you don't get it, good luck. Because there is a lot that, for everything that I understood and thought was cool about this world, there was something equally frustratingly opaque, and I just straight up did not understand. Like, so, like, in this the city that they're in, like, Park City, weird name for a city, by the way, there's, like, competing factions, and they're the top dogs and the underdogs, and they're fighting, and I have no clue why they're fighting. I don't understand. They have, like, regularly scheduled battles, but these are, like, real battles where people die. And I don't know what they're fighting over. I just legit do not know what they're fighting over. It's very confusing. So, pros and cons. Which makes the fact... Which makes the characters that interact in this world all the more crucial. And I think... I'm not going to say they're, like, super interesting, complex characters, but I think they do get the job done. Like, our main character, Belle LeBlanc, this very standard, like, I am a mysterious child. Essentially, she's a human born into a world of beast people. Like, we got cat people, we got, like, bug people, and mermaids, and bird people. And she's the only... They call her featureless. She's the only featureless person in this world. And so she's got her journey of, like, I want to find out who I am and where I belong. And so, probably the most standard archetype you could think of, but it fits in this world. It makes sense, especially as the show goes on and we learn more about who she is in relation to this world, with this... That, by the end of this first season, which, by the way, this is getting another season, I think it's only going to be another season because the novels, there was only 4 volumes of the novel. So yeah, I guess it is a light novel. So yeah, I think there were 4 volumes of the light novel. I presume this first season covered 2, so next season we'll probably cover the other 2. But we learn that she has some connection to the god of this world. Also, there's a lot of Central and Northern European mythology baked into this. A lot of stuff that is just German words slapped onto stuff. There's a world tree, essentially. The super bad villains in this are referred to as Nidhogg, which is the dragon that gnaws at the roots of the world tree in Norse mythology. So, again, really cool combination of stuff. And, like, Belle is just a really fun character, I guess. She doesn't have a ton of personality, but just the way that she interacts with people is really fun and interesting. Also, she kind of looks like Megumin from Konosuba. I'm sure that has absolutely nothing to do with why I like her so much. Nothing at all. And then she gets paired up with this edgy wolf boy, Adonis. Fucking great name. By the way, a lot of the characters in this are named after liquor. We got Shandy, Sherry, Gin Buck, Dram. What was another one? Fucking Benedictine was one. And then the one that I'm ashamed to admit, it took me over halfway through this season to realize this, because the character that made me realize it was named Tom Collins. It's so fucking dumb. It is so dumb, but you know what? Everything else is so crazy that I just kind of rolled with it. So yeah, Adonis, edgy wolf boy. Every sword he touches withers away, and so, like, I do think he and Belle actually have some decent romantic chemistry. At one point, he's just like, "Hey, would you have my kids?" And I was like, "Wow, we're just gonna go right into it." And and you know what? They have some great chemistry and also a lot of conflict between them as they struggle to figure out how they belong in this world, leading to some pretty uncomfortable scenes near the end of this. I will say there is a mild sexual assault scene near the end of this series that feels weird to say, but it is a motivated sexual assault scene. If that makes any sense, I guess you just kind of gotta watch the show because I could explain it, but it's like, what? Whatever. You should. I guess I'm giving this show a recommendation, despite the fact that it kind of doesn't look very good. This is a very bland production. I don't even know who made it. Character designs are okay. They get a little bit of face every now and then. The action's okay. It's not going to blow you away, except for the battle in episode 8, which I thought was pretty solid. Belle just throws a flaming couch at a dude, and that ripped. Not gonna lie, like that. So there's nothing about the production is definitely the biggest hiccup to enjoying the show, because it's just really not good looking, except for the specific like world building aspects of it. Like the swords look pretty cool. All of the tree root symbolism looks pretty cool. Yeah, this is just a really fun. I think the world building makes up for the lack of visual presentation of the world building. It's certainly trying its hardest. Because there's just so many like fun things about this world. Like we got mermaids who change gender constantly, but also the mermaids' personalities are mirrors of the people that they attach themselves to in this world, like emotionally attach themselves to. Just a lot of fun ideas. And also Kevin Penkin did the score for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know how they got Kevin Penkin attached to this such a mid production. I assume it's because of Toa Ubukata. Because if I recall, I forgot who the director was, but he's kind of a nobody as far as I can tell. He hasn't really done any major. I don't remember seeing anything major on his filmography. But yeah, it's got a Kevin Penkin score, and it is a Kevin Penkin score. It's very bombastic and complex and very fun to listen to. Although I will say, the implementation of the score can be very overbearing at times. It can get a little too in your face. That's not his fault. I would say that's the music producer and the director's fault. Kevin Penkin can do no wrong. So, yeah, I guess I recommend this show. It's not the easiest watch, but if you want weird anime world building and you are interested in a very show don't tell narrative that where a lot of the telling comes from just from natural dialogue. You find out how this world works through people just talking to each other in a non-expository manner, which I always have to give props to because anime is so fucking bad at that sometimes. So, yeah. I guess I'll tune in for season 2. It's supposed to come out next year, I guess, so I'm not going to say I'm eagerly anticipating it, but I won't turn it down.
Okay, surprisingly, Bye Bye Earth is complete. And we're going to put it not too far up, but we're going to put it in the number 34 spot for so far with a strong 6. Very surprised at how much I like that. Alright, so now, how many randoms we got left? 25. So let's see what is next. 7. What is 7? Why does nobody remember me in this world? I do not remember a single person talking about this show while it was airing. I'm gonna assume it's an isekai based on In This World. Let's give it a go.
Well, I guess it's pretty fitting that after I praise Bye Bye Earth so much for its show don't tell and lack of unnecessary exposition, I immediately roll into a show that does the exact opposite. And it sucks shit for it. No. That's like 90% of my complaints about this, because it is like, I still would have hated it for doing this, but watching it immediately after Bye Bye Earth makes it so much more fucking obvious how fucking terrible the exposition is in this. Like, it even, like, there was even the moment that made me turn it off was like when you could see them prepping to do exposition. Like, it's like, yeah, the prophet said, hey, and then there's a beat. I'm like, don't do it. Don't do the exposition. And then, and I'm like, no. And then they launch into, like, all of the different heroes from the past where I'm like, fucking no, come on. What the fuck is wrong with you? Also, contrary to Bye Bye Earth, this world looks boring as shit. It's a hodgepodge of just fantasy races, but we don't really see any of them yet. We just learn about them. So it just feels like shit tacked on top of shit. But also there's like modern stuff in it. They drive around in a fucking Humvee. And I think the main character's main weapon is like a magic gun or something. I haven't seen him use it yet. Oh, this sucks. Also, it looks like shit. That's the other 10%. It looks like shit. This is bad. Bad compositing, bad character designs, bad color design, bad monster design from the bit of monster designs that we got. Sucks shit. Get out of my face.
Okay, why does nobody remember me in this world? Off the list. I don't care why anyone doesn't remember you. Fuck off. Let's see what's next. Crank down the number generator. It's gonna be 21. What is 21? Sakuna of Rice and Ruin. Okay, this is a PA Works show with some pretty interesting character designs from what I've seen. Got a lot of hype before it came out, and then no hype at all afterwards. So let's see what happened.
Yeah, I don't think I'm really vibing with this one. I got about 2/3 through the first episode of Sakuna of Rice and Ruin, which is the third PA Works show from this season that I've run into. The others being Mayanaka Punch and Nare Nare. But yeah, I'm just not feeling this one. This is the PA Works that I'm familiar with, where there's a lot of craft put into the animation, like the design and the animation, but the designs aren't things that I particularly like, and the story is kind of boring. Like, reminds me a bit of a... What was that one with the pink-haired girl where she had to bring like tourism to the back to the town, and there was like a chupacabra mascot. Whatever. What was that one called? I can't remember, but it feels kind of like it's in that vein, sort of, but with like a little bit more of an action fantasy bend to it. But I was just watching this first episode and just in my head, I was just seeing all of the story beats that this story was going to hit, and it just hit them in rapid succession as I was seeing, like, 5 minutes after I saw them in my brain. I was just like, okay, we're not breaking any new ground here. And you know what? That in itself is not bad. Tropes are tropes for a reason, but you have to build on top of those tropes with interesting things in order for them to stand out. And this show does absolutely nothing so far in terms of standing out other than the setting. Well, actually, no. Even for the setting, that doesn't really stand out. Like a god being exiled for insulting the head god and fucking up her duties. That's a pretty old story, actually. So, certainly not breaking new ground there. And it's standard character archetype 37B, arrogant prick. I don't know why I picked 37B. That's probably a lot higher up in numbers in terms of like well-known character archetypes. And for as much as the human characters have been on screen already, we really don't. We get a little bit of personality, but not enough to make them interesting. Yeah, and again, there is effort put into the production. It's a very, very polished production with some very interesting and unique character designs. I just don't think they're very cool or like captivating. It's not really holding my attention in like a. They are not striking designs. They're different, but not striking or cool. So, I think I'm just gonna pass on this one, unfortunately.
Alright, Sakuna coming off the list. Let's roll again, see what we get next. We're gonna do 2 more for this round before we jump to our end caps. So it is 14. What is 14? Dahlia in Bloom. Another one that I have not heard a single person talk about. I can't even begin to think about what it is. Maybe it's a romance series? Who knows? Let's try it out.
Well, I got farther into that one than I expected. I got 3 episodes into Dahlia in Bloom before I gave up. Turns out this one was the isekai. And I'll be honest, I think I was hoodwinked once again by one really good character design that got me to watch way more of this show than I should have. So this show is kind of like the Saint's magic is omnipotent by way of Maji Revo, so it's like female MC isekai, but instead of like potions or anything, it's magic gadgets. So like that subplot from Maji Revo. Just without the royal fuckery and the action and stuff. Which is probably for the best, because I don't think this production could handle any action at all. This is near slideshow level animation. It's not good. It's quite bad, actually, at some points. Like, especially when it has to have characters standing against really terrible CG backgrounds. This show barely moves, and when it does not move well. And literally every character besides Dahlia looks super mediocre looking. But they made sure to get her right, which, can't say their priorities were wrong because she is pretty cute. She's basically looks like Shirayuki-hime, or like the main character of Shirayuki-hime, but with like slightly longer red hair. And I was actually kind of, at least mildly interested in the magic devices kind of thrust of this. Like the start of episode, like, you get through the first episode and you're like, okay, that's what the premise is. Now, how are they going to make this premise interesting? Like, episode to episode. And then the second episode, they start to branch out more into, like, stuff besides just combining different magic crystals and stuff. And it turning slimes into raincoats by way of, like, dissolving them into a liquid. And it was like, okay, this is pretty interesting. And then the second half of the second episode and all of the third episode is just this weird marriage subplot that completely takes over the entire story. It's like a marriage by way of convenience so that both family houses become more secure. But then the entire third episode is the guy breaking off the engagement with Dahlia and just her, like, reorganizing her life, which, like, is a pretty cool idea, and there's, like, there are ideas there to work with, but there's really there's very little emotional reaction from Dahlia at all, and, like, you could do something with that too, but they just move past it. There's, like, very little conflict going on in that massive conflict that just sprung up out of nowhere. So it felt really poorly handled, so I don't really trust this show to have stronger emotional turns as it goes on. And again, it completely took over the story. Like, there wasn't even any magic tool, like, science stuff going on in the third episode. So it's just like, what am I here for? And again, it did have potential. Like, we had, during their betrothal, the guy fiance was, like, slowly becoming more, like, micromanagey with Dahlia's appearance and stuff, and she didn't really fight back against it at all, and I was hoping there would be, like, a breaking point of, like, where she says, no, this thing you can't change about me. But we never really got to that point because he breaks up with her by the start of the third episode. So, yeah, this one's not really good.
Okay, Dahlia in Bloom coming off the list. What a shame. Alright, we'll do one more random before our next end cap. Let's see what it's gonna be. 2! Higher up on the list. Oh, buddy! Mission Yozakura Family. Okay. I am a pretty big fan of the manga for this one. I have heard some questionable things about this adaptation, and this one's 2 core. Slightly longer than 2 core, actually. I think it's like 27 episodes. So let's see if it's worth the adaptation.
Okay, well, that went slightly better than I expected, though not as much as I was hoping. I've just finished up all of Mission Yozakura Family. Man, why did they adapt it like this? And that's a plural statement because there are so many things about this that I just do not like the way they adapted it. And yet, on the whole, it still feels like Mission Yozakura Family. It still has the right feel to it, but it's just so lacking in comparison to the manga. Yeah, I've been reading the manga since it started. The physical volume started coming out in English. This is the one. This actually just came in yesterday, I think. This is volume 13, so I'm gonna get around to that soon. So I'm a big fan of this series. I don't talk about it very often, but theoretically, Mission Yozakura Family is my ideal anime. Well, it's close to being my ideal anime. If it had a little, like, basically my ideal anime is a weekly Shonen Jump action series with a romance at the forefront of it. And so Mission Yozakura Family is very close to my ideal there. And you know what? The anime does a decent job of capturing not quite the romance between Taiyo and Mutsumi, because, I mean, I'll be honest, the manga doesn't quite have as much as I was looking for with that either, but it's there. I think they have it's sort of whereas with a lot of romance series, you sort of it's sort of like you watch the romance build up, and that's how you get attached to the romance. This one, it kind of has their romance baked into it already. Or at least has the relationship between Taiyo and Mutsumi baked into it already, which is as this sort of very solid support structure kind of relationship, which is why they can kind of get away with the suddenly we're married now trope, which honestly I'm kind of a fan of. That's one of my, like, guilty pleasure tropes, I guess, or not guilty pleasure tropes, but like just an odd anime trope that I have found myself attached to. It's why I'm such a big fan of Fly Me to the Moon, Tony Kala. But I do think the chemistry between Taiyo and Mutsumi is really good in this. They don't lose too much from the manga in terms of the feel of it, but in terms of, like, the narrative of it, there is a pretty hefty chunk lost. Like, this anime cuts out a lot of content from the manga. Like, more than is usual for a Shonen Jump action series being adapted into anime. Like, they just straight up cut an entire arc at the beginning from the beginning of the manga. I think it's called the Flower Bin arc. It's like, and then they cut most of the Popopo arc, however you pronounce that. And I didn't even realize that they had cut, since it's been so long since I read that part of the manga, I didn't even realize that they cut it until late in the series, where they reference the villain of that arc, who is sort of like a quote-unquote good guy now, and I was like, wait a minute, was that in the anime? No, it wasn't in the anime. Why did they cut that? And I can kind of understand. This adaptation has some weird structural choices. Or not weird, but just structural choices that I don't 100% agree with. But, like, because, like, maybe people didn't like those arcs in Japan. I don't know. And I can understand, because, like, they're both arcs where it's, like, back-to-back Mutsumi being threatened by different people. Although I would say they are still different in their contexts. But cutting both of them is a weird choice. But the long and short of it is they wanted to get to the end of the Skeleton Island arc, or whatever you want to call it. Yozakura. I call it the Yozakura Frontlines because that's the cooler sounding name. They needed to get to the end of that arc for this anime adaptation because that ends with the wedding reception, and that's a really good place to end at, and it's also at the end of a very big action arc with the defeat of Kawashita. So I understand that why stuff was cut and why they needed to get to that point. But there's so much lost in the interim there. So it's like, we just lose some of those early moments. Again, I'm going to have to go back and read the first 2 volumes now because I'm pretty sure there is some good Taiyo Mutsumi content in there that is just not in the anime anymore. And also, they cut the Aquarium Date chapter, which is absolutely unforgivable. That's one of the few moments of just straight up like rom-com stuff. So, and it's one of the best chapters of the manga. I don't know why they decided to cut it. It's, from what I've seen of Yozakura fans, it's like one of the most popular chapters. Again, maybe it's different in Japan, and also this manga just got such a slow start in the West, sort of. Like, it was digital only until like volume 10, and then Viz, or somewhere around there, and then Viz was like, fine, we'll put out a physical volume, which is when I finally got around to reading it. So, like, this is not a highly, in case you haven't been paying attention, this is not a highly praised Shonen Jump series. I like it a lot, but it's not in like the Jujutsu Kaisen, My Hero, Demon Slayer tier. It's not even in like the Gintama tier. It's in like the Siren tier. Does anyone remember that? So I understand this one's not going to get the best treatment as an anime. So, but doesn't mean I can't complain about it. Anyway. Sorry, this has just turned into me ranting about the differences between the anime and the manga. The anime itself is totally fine. It's very serviceable. Honestly, though, I don't know if how far I would have gotten if I wasn't a fan of the manga, because this is a very, very plain adaptation. It's just super straightforward, not a whole lot visually going on. In fact, a lot of the animation is just not there. I do like the character designs. I think they were well adapted to the screen. They're kind of hard to mess up as character designs. There's nothing particularly complex about them, but they look almost exactly like how I expected them to look, except that I guess the hair is slightly more saturated than I was expecting, so it comes off just a tad bit garish at times. And while we're on the subject of the characters, the voice cast is actually really fucking good in this. Like, the voice acting is really good. There's not any, like, heart-rending emotional scenes or anything like that, but, like, the tone, the sound of everyone's voices is, like, almost exactly what I was expecting from the manga. Like, the only noticeable deviation is Kyoichiro. Although I think that one, my perception of what his voice should be like was colored by the fact that his character design is so similar to the dad in Food Wars, like the evil dad character. So his voice just snuck in to my interpretation of Kyoichiro. But the anime version is a lot more annoying and whiny almost, and I like that interpretation so much better than what was in my head. Definitely gonna read that. Definitely gonna have that voice going in my head when I read Koichiro next time I go to the manga. And it's a hella stacked cast too. Like we got Akari Kito as Futaba, who I know best as Tsukasa from Fly Me to the Moon. We got fucking Aoi Yuki as Shion. It's fucking Aoi Yuki. Which they took 2 pages of a song a song from the manga and extended that into like a 2-minute sequence in the anime because they had Aoi Yuki to work with. It's like, yeah, we're gonna give Aoi Yuki a song. Of course we are. What are you, crazy? So good choice there. Big props to, I think it's Kaede Hondo, who is Mutsumi's voice actress, because she is just the pitch perfect supportive love interest, soothing supportive love interest voice works fucking perfectly. And I guess that's a complaint that I can say about both just the story as a whole, though, sort of getting back into like the actual story. Both the anime and the manga, Mutsumi is kind of a not the most well-developed character. She's there to be a wife. She's got a little bit more to her in the manga, but not much. So that's why I say that Yozakura Family is like close to being my ideal series, but it doesn't quite have the oomph to it on the romance front. So could definitely use a little bit more there. Taio's good. He's a great MC, just sort of thrust into this spy world, fish out of water kind of guy, who is just very easily adapts to the situation around him. So makes him and his dedication to protecting Mutsumi makes him pretty compelling. Again, I do think they do a good job of, like, in the first episode, really establishing, like, how much Taio cares for her, despite them not actually being in a relationship until they get married. Yeah, it works. It just works. There is something... I'm having trouble... See, my thoughts about this one are so complicated because I'm wrestling with, like, well, what are my complaints that are because it's not like the manga, and what are my complaints because it's just not good, and just how things would be, like, more well structured and so on and so forth. But I will say the good parts of Yozakura Family, the manga, are mostly intact in the anime. Like, the weird episodic stories, most of them make it in as much as they can without treading on the more plot-centric stuff. Like, they did Nanao's episode really well. That was a really good one. Just the way that they sort of piecemeal sort of put together the characterization of the different Yozakura siblings, all of who are really fun and lovable, except for Kyoichiro, who is purposefully off-putting and annoying, but still kind of, as you go through the series, the Siscon stuff becomes less grating as he becomes a more complex character, especially in his relationship to Taio. Yeah, it's just a fun show, I guess. There is a sort of... I'm trying to put my finger on what specific words I want to use to describe this show. It is it feels very anime, I guess. I don't know exactly what I mean by that, but it feels just like everything just sort of fits together in this sort of spy like mission kind of stuff. Damn, I am just completely flubbing over all my words today. I just have no clue what I want to say about this show other than it's okay, because it's not great looking, as I mentioned earlier. This is a Silverlink show, and Silverlink has always been the studio where it's like, oh, it's going to Silverlink, huh? Well, good luck with that. They're not quite B Train level or like EMT Squared or Studio Dean or like bottom tier studio, but they're a studio where it's like, boy, if Shin Onuma's not working on it, it's gonna be a struggle. Shin Onuma being an apprentice of Akiyuki Shinbo from Shaft, who went on to work at Silverlink for a while. I think he still works at Silverlink, and he makes their more interesting looking productions. But yeah, this is not a Shin Onuma anime. I forgot who the director was, but he's done like he is a Silverlink guy. This is a Silverlink ass production, for better or worse. And you know what? Sometimes they try. Sometimes they actually try to make stuff look cool. Sometimes it does look cool. Sometimes it just looks really confusing. Like some of the action scenes, you can be like, wow, they're trying to make this look cool, but what the hell just happened? Yeah. I guess I felt like I had more to say about this show than I actually did. I like that, again, like the manga, it has this sort of strong theme of like family support and being able to rely on other people in order to accomplish your goals and stuff. I think it does that really well with the different wacky members of the Yozakura family. I guess that's the long and short of it. If you want like wacky anime action shenanigans, this is gonna be a pretty decent show for you to watch. There are better ones. I just stuck with this one because I'm a big fan of the manga, and it does what the manga does, although I really don't like that it cut a lot of the stuff from the manga that I liked. Oh, this is what it feels like, huh? This is what it feels like to be a manga fan betrayed by the anime adaptation. As far as I know, I don't think that's happened to me yet, actually. I think this might be the first time that I've really noticed that. I'm trying to think of other manga. I'm glancing around at my shelf to see if there are other manga like that I have seen, but as far as I can tell, this is the first one where I'm really like, man, this adaptation just did not go the way I was hoping it would. It's still food. I'm gonna eat it. It's my anime junk. Not quite junk food, but it's like an edibly cooked meal. I'm not gonna go out of my way to recommend the anime. It's definitely not the ideal way to watch this unless you really want to know what the voice cast sounds like. In which case, I guess just watch a few episodes so you can get the voices into your head. Because it is a good voice cast. And you know what? The soundtrack's pretty decent too. There's no themes in there in particular that really stuck out to me, but like it's got that hard rock edge to it that works really well. And the goofy slice of life moments are there to alleviate the tension in between the bigger action-centric arcs. And honestly, I think this show is the best when it just has those goofy episodes back to back to back. I think that's when the show's at its best. I will say, like, the last third-ish of the anime, the animation does get a little bit better. Like, episode 18 in particular stood out to me as like, oh, they're actually putting... there's actually a lot more going into this one than was before. Episode 18 being the Hot Springs episode, I believe. Yeah, it's an underwhelming adaptation of a manga that I really like. Should you watch it? If you haven't read the manga, sure. But if you haven't read the manga, you should just read the manga because it's good.
Okay, mission Yozakura family is complete. Unfortunately, we're not going to go very far up on the list here. We're going to put you right in the number 37 spot with a strong 6. I think I need to start shifting these scores a little lower because I don't think these are strong 6s, to be honest. I just need to do some overall list reassessment. But anyway, yeah, this could have been better. Okay. I think that's all the randoms we'll do for this video, right? Yeah, we got 21 left. So we're going to move on to our next end cap. Spice and Wolf Merchant meets Wise Wolf. This is the new Spice and Wolf remake. I hope it doesn't look bad because I have seen mixed opinions on how good this show looks. Let's dive in. Okay, this is going to be a weird one to talk about because I did not finish this new season of Spice and Wolf, technically. So I watched the first couple episodes and it just does not have the sauce of the original. So what I did is I just watched the new content, the stuff that wasn't adapted in the previous seasons. So it's episodes 20 to 25 is what I believe I watched the first 3 episodes and I was like, no, I can't do this. So then I just jumped to episode 20 and finished it off from there. I'll talk about that section at the end of this part, but first I want to talk about why I don't like this remake. But firstly, I'm a massive Spice and Wolf fan. Okay, like I did a whole video on it for Anime News Network that you can go check out. Maybe I'll link, if I remember, I'll link that in the comments of this video. Holo was my first like waifu as an adult anime fan. Got this awesome figure of her at ASEN one year. And she was my waifu for a very, very long time. So, and as I talk about in the ANN video, Spice and Wolf was very fundamental to my perception of what I like in anime. So much of what I like in Spice and Wolf is what I like about anime, period. And it's not just like the story, it's the presentation of the story, the way the story is performed, the way it's structured. So original Spice and Wolf is like still probably like around top 25, top 30 for me, somewhere in there. And this one just does not have the sauce. Mostly in that, the way I described this on Twitter was, because don't let me like bury the lead or anything. The original Spice and Wolf is not the best looking show. It has a lot of animation problems, especially in the first season. But the way I describe it is, the original Spice and Wolf is a production that was barely hanging on by a thread. But even still, it did its damnedest to look as good as it possibly could. Like, I actually double-checked one of the older episodes after I finished
the new season, not because of the animation issue, but because of another issue that I'll get to in a second. But I rewatched like the first 5 minutes of episode 2, and there's just like so much extra stuff happening in the scene where Holo and Lawrence are changing. Like there's this gag of like you can see Lawrence's jacket just slowly slipping down. I don't remember if that happened in the remake. The fact that I don't remember it happening tells me that it probably didn't. Maybe it did, but it wasn't noticeable. And what I did notice about the remake, so there's this gag where Holo's like, I would like it if your beard was a bit longer, and she's like this. In the remake, it's kind of hard to tell what she's getting at, but she's talking about like whiskers, like actual like cat or dog whiskers. In the original series, they do like little like dotted lines coming off of her face to show like, okay, whiskers. So it's like that the gag is like less impacting, I guess, there. So I completely forgot to finish my thought, actually. So Spice and Wolf 2008 is a production that is barely hanging on by a thread, but it is doing its damnedest to look as good as it possibly can, as often as it can, regardless of whether it can animate a horse or not. One of the more infamous animation cuts from that show. Spice and Wolf 2024, on the other hand, is a show that preemptively cuts corners in order to get the job done and have a higher average quality. But as a result, it doesn't have a lot of stuff that really looks cool. Like, the shots are less interesting and less impacting. The compositing is notably worse. This is a anime that seriously suffers from medium shot with poor compositing syndrome, which I think I need to do a fucking video about just because it is so... If those words make any sense to you at all, you have probably seen as much anime as I have, and you are fucking sick of it. If you've seen... Like, whenever people complain about, like, compositing in a Mappa show, that's what I'm talking about. And it is in so much modern anime. And it sucks balls. It sucks. Just the way that the characters look completely disconnected from the backgrounds is just so not good. And the remake has that so often. Whereas the reason it happens... The long and short of the reason it happens is because the actual digital compositing of the character designs is so incredibly different looking from the digital compositing of the backgrounds. Whereas with 2008, the art style of the character designs in the background was a lot more similar looking. And so it's easier for the characters to blend in to the scene that they're in. Whereas with a lot of modern anime, those two processes are just completely separate, and so when you put them together, it looks like shit. So that looks bad. But also, it's just not as cinematically interesting. There's just not as many interesting shots. Holo is not as hot in this one. Like, that probably a weird thing to say if you don't know anything about Spice and Wolf, but one of the key appeals of Spice and Wolf is that Holo is really fucking hot. And I don't think she's that hot in the remake. Not only is her character design just not as appealing, but also, like, she looks a little more childish in this one. There's a lot less of the ancient wolf goddess appeal to her. But also she's just not shot as interestingly. Like, I think episode 2, if you compare both episode 2s back to back, you will see, and episode 1 too, actually the first 2 episodes, if you watch them back to back for each series, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's just, she's just not as attractive, which is weird for me to harp on that much in a normal series, but again, that is one of the appeals of Spice and Wolf. It is undeniable that that is one of the appeals of Spice and Wolf. They wouldn't have a naked wolf girl in so many of the shots if that wasn't the appeal of Spice and Wolf. Yeah, so I just don't like how this remake looks. I simply... Again, the original doesn't look great, but this one looks so much less interesting than the original. The character designs are just not as good. The art direction isn't as good. And even on the sound end, it's just not as good. Which is a very weird thing for me to say about a Kevin Penkin score. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I stan Kevin Penkin all the fucking time. But the only way that you could stump Kevin Penkin is by putting him on a fucking Spice and Wolf series, because Spice and Wolf has one of the most iconic anime soundtracks of all time. It is so godly good, incredible, like easily like a top 10 soundtrack. I believe it's Yasuharu Takahashi, I think, who did the original Spice and Wolf soundtrack. I'm not entirely sure, don't quote me on that, but I think that's who it was, and his work is just fucking incredible. It's not... So, Kevin Penkin's work is good, but it's not... Also not the best Kevin Penkin score. Like, it's no Made in Abyss, it's no Tower of God. Even, I would say, Bye Bye Earth had a better score, which I talked about a little while ago. I don't know if it's in this video or the previous video. We'll see when that comes out. So, it's not a bad score, but it's just not... And again, I only watched like... eight and a half episodes, so if there were some repeated themes, I didn't see them, so I'm just not going to comment on that at all. But it's just simply not as mind-blowingly iconic as the original Spice and Wolf score. And you know what? Here's my hot take that's in a sea of hot takes that I probably just deluged with. The voice acting's not as good. So, they brought back Ami Koshimizu and Jun Fukuyama as Holo and Lawrence. The original casting. And without... Again, this is the reason why I went back and watched the original after I finished the remake. Because I was listening to their performances and I was like, they sound old. Not old, they sound older than they should be. Because at first I didn't know that they had brought them back for the remake. And then I confirmed that they did. And so then after everything was done, I went back and rewatched a little bit of episode 2. And not only do they sound younger, but they sound so much more energized and like excited to perform these roles. The banter between Holo and Lawrence just has so much more charm and like enticement to it. So I think there is something wrong with the sound directing for this series. Either they just couldn't get the right performances out of these guys, or it's just the fault of, well, they played them before. Anime has this thing where it's like, if there's an anime remake, very often they will get the same voice actor to come back and do the character, even if it's been like 15 years. That's why fucking, what's the guy from Lupin the Third? The guy with the gun. I forgot what his name is. That's why his voice actor stuck around until he was 90. 90 something. But, yeah, I just don't. The voice acting just isn't as good. And when. And another part of the key appeal of Spice and Wolf is the banter between Holo and Lawrence. And so if that isn't, like, top tier acting, it starts to fall apart. And I legitimately think that the acting is just not as good in this one as it is in the original. Some of that might have to do with like directing. Some of it might have to do with the fact that they've already done this before. Some of this might have to do with the fact that they're just older. Whatever it is, I just don't like it as much. And again, compare episode 2 back to back and you will see what I'm talking about. Or I guess you'll hear what I'm talking about. But anyway, I jumped to the last arc of the series, which is the first new stuff that this anime covered, because the old anime skipped over book 4 and went straight to book 5 because that was a better season ender. But so this one went back and covered it, and it was good. Pretty notably lacking in like economics stuff. Not totally lacking, but in comparison to the first 3 arcs, it is a little bit lacking in terms of like the, again, another key aspect of Spice and Wolf, the economic stuff. And I do like the stuff that they have where it's like he plays on the church's like tendencies through Holo's supernatural powers and creates a miracle, and then he starts brokering a business deal. And we sort of learn about the tax structure of this particular village. So that's kind of interesting, but I guess I was expecting more of a economic solution to the problem instead of a supernatural solution to the problem. But you know what? It's fine. I like Elsa and Evan as our main like new characters for this arc. Elsa's a very cute, freckled priest girl. Is she cute? I like the bartender lady. I forgot what her name was. Ina, I think, or Ela. I don't remember. Now that I'm talking about it, I actually really don't have a whole lot to say about this final arc of this season. Because it's much like the rest, I'm not going to say like the rest of the season, much like what I also saw of this season, it just doesn't have the same level of charm and captivation as the first series. Like there's stuff where I look at it and go, if the acting was just a little bit better and the shot composition was a little more interesting, this could be really fucking good. But it's just not. So I'm not going to end up ranking this one on the list because I didn't actually watch the whole thing. I would give this final arc, like a light to decent 7, probably. It was good. Not mind-blowing anyway. So yeah. It's at this point it's like I could watch the next season because the first arc's obviously going to be the Lenos arc, and then the whole rest of it's going to be new stuff that hasn't been adapted yet. But also, there are 24 volumes of Spice and Wolf. So it's like, you're going to need, if you cut out the side story novels, bring it down to like 20, you'll still need 5 2-core seasons to adapt everything. And I just don't see that happening. I just don't. It's I don't see the fervor for it. I don't see the want. Maybe there is in Japan. I don't really see it here. So at this point, it's kind of just like, do I just read the novels? I bought the first novel a while ago. So I guess I'll read it at some point. Oh, also, I completely forgot. This season bookends itself with what is very obviously Holo talking to a child who is probably her daughter. But they hide their faces, and then I don't remember if it was in the first episode, but in the last episode, they're still hiding their faces, but obviously you can tell from the voice that it's Holo, and also you can see the bag of wheat around her neck, so it's like, okay, that's obviously Holo, but in the silhouettes you can't see her ears, but it's obviously her. You're not hiding it, so why? You kind of dropped the giant ass spoiler, but you think you didn't, I guess? Weird. And also, just in terms of like, hey, maybe just adapting everything directly isn't always the best option. Apparently the redhead in the original Spice and Wolf in that first arc is anime original. She is not present at all in the remake. So, again, I didn't finish the first arc of the remake, but it's so much better to have, like she has so much more of a connection to Lawrence in that first episode of the first series than the random dude that he met up there. And there's, like, more tension. So it works. It's so much smarter to have her be the villain of that arc. Spoilers, I guess, if you didn't see the original Spice and Wolf yet. So that's a win in the anime original column, I guess. So I guess the question is, do I want to watch season 2? Because I'm already disappointed. I guess I'll just give it a shot and see how far I get whenever that comes out. I think it's supposed to be next year. I don't know. Maybe I'll read the light novel in the meantime. Stare at my Holo figure a little more. Yeah, this is just kind of a letdown, honestly. What a shame.
Okay. Spice and Wolf, unfortunately, is just getting deleted off the list. Not having a good run with end caps for this season. It's just not going well.